this is Angela with Progress Permaculture. It's a pretty nice evening here in Portland, Oregon. It definitely feels like spring. There's enough daylight after dinner that I can go for an evening walk. It is making me feel really excited about the coming gardening season. Things are beginning to wake up out in the garden, and it really feels like a time of regeneration and new beginning, right? That's what spring is about. It is about new beginnings and a chance to start the cycle all over, try something new, try something better, build something more resilient than we had last year. Recently, I posted a meme on my Facebook page, which got like a little bit of weird pushback about being bourgeois or something. And I don't really understand that kind of a feedback. It was a meme that spoke to me. And it's something that tends to come to the surface a lot more in my mind when we are in springtime, when things are starting over again. It's about how we have the opportunity to have one of two mindsets. One mindset is, I have read something on this subject and I now consider myself an expert, right? The Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know enough to know that I don't know enough. And we can develop kind of a sense of superiority and a sense of artificial expertise that doesn't really exist when we have actually just begun to open up our understanding of a subject. And then we have the mindset of, I am always learning. I have never learned enough. I have never completely exhausted what I need to know. I may have expertise. I may have been practicing permaculture for over 20 years. I may know a lot, but I'm not at the end of what I can know about this subject. And I think about that a lot when we go into springtime, because I think, here is a new year. Here is a chance for me to expand my understanding even more. I've been doing this a long time, but it is not just another turn around the wheel. It is not just the same old, and I'm back to my spring routine. For me in my permaculture garden, I see spring as a chance to refine, a chance to expand my understanding, and a chance to change the way I interact with my garden based on what I've learned. Every year, there is a chance to know better and do better and apply what I have gleaned over the last year and make a more resilient garden. And for me, that's really hopeful. It means that the garden is never boring. It's never stagnant. I've never come to the end of my design. I have never come to the pinnacle of what my garden can be. I can always push forward toward greater beauty, greater abundance, greater efficiency in my system. So when we're looking at permaculture, how can we cultivate this mindset of we are always learning? How can we encourage a mindset that focuses on continuing education and feeling like we have a certain level of humility, a certain level of awareness that we may know a lot, but it doesn't mean that we have plumbed the depths of everything there is to learn about that subject, and that the more we continue to gain information, the more we continue to be open and receptive to education, to either, direct instruction from those who have more experience than us, or the permaculture principle of observe and interact, gleaning information from the landscape by opening up our senses, or also how much we can gain from just reading and exploring the thoughts and the essays and the sharing the experiences of people who have gone before us and have worked alongside us. How can we encourage learning in permaculture? Because when we are always open to learning, when we are always receptive, we are always in a posture of being able to receive and grow our understanding, we push toward greater abundance. I think there's a lot of misconception in permaculture, or kind of like in sustainable living movements in general, that there's a top out, there's a limit to abundance. Sure, there are a limit to some resources, but that doesn't mean that the abundance we can produce in a system is going to top out if we use permaculture design principles. We are all about cycling and increasing fertility so that we are chasing what is the limit of our system, because we haven't really found it. We have the limits of conventional agriculture systems, right? We know the limits of those kind of old industrial practices, but we don't really know the limit of permaculture design. And I think when we look at systems in nature and how they operate, when we look to that example and we educate ourselves ourselves as to what kind of abundance nature can produce, like, flocks of passenger pigeons that blacken the sky, they're so abundant, or, herds of bison that are 2 million strong, that are just a thunderous cacophony of hooves across the landscape. We see that nature can produce the kind of abundance that we can't even really conceptualize yet. And so when we are looking at not coming to the end of our limit, not knowing what the upper threshold of abundance is, I think being open to learning is key to realizing there's no limit to our learning. That means there's no limit to our abundance. And so what can we do? What can we do to help folks, help ourselves and help other people increase our learning? Well, I think number one is the acceptance that whatever knowledge we have is partial. We don't have the whole picture. Whatever we know is not all there is to be known on that subject. And I think science in general has a pretty good viewpoint of, like, we're analyzing the data that we have right now, and we're constructing, hypotheses, and we're tabulating results of our experiments, and maybe we're crafting theories based on what we know right now, but we are receptive to changing our outlook and our understanding should new data come in. Knowing that whatever view we have based on our knowledge is partial and incomplete, I think is super important. Just accept where we're at, right? Accept the reality that we can do more, we can be more, we can know more, we can learn more. So how else can we encourage learning in permaculture and a posture of being receptive to learning? Once we've accepted that we are not at the limit of what we can learn, and that the door is wide open, and that there is so much more that can come our way and enhance our understanding, we need to set up systems that help us monitor the environment around us and the realities of our existence and the realities of what is happening out in our garden and in our communities. We need frameworks to help us observe and collect data, and therefore base our interactions. This is permaculture principle number 1, by the way, observe and interact. How can we create systems that facilitate our observation before we interact? And then the second half of that is, how can we provide opportunities for interaction? Because we have that loop of observe and interact. Is I observe some more, and then I interact. And once I interact, I am observing what is happening when I interact, and I'm observing the consequences of my interaction, right? What is the production that is occurring as a result of my interaction? What is the fallout? If perhaps it's negative, perhaps I kind of whiffed it pretty hard and I need to reevaluate. So it's that cyclical relationship, much like entering into spring once again. I'm allowing observe and interact to be a cycle. So how can we support opportunities to observe and collect data? How can we create opportunities to participate and interact and then feed that cycle? When we're talking about opportunities to observe and interact, who are the participants in that cycle? Who are the participants in that process? When we are cultivating learning, when we are saying that the more we learn and the more receptive we are to learning, the more likely we are to create resilient communities. Who's in those communities, and how can we encourage them to be a participant? How can we remove barriers for people so that not only are more people able to participate in observing and interacting, more people are able to participate in education, but also what do those people bring to the table that they can teach us, right? When we limit participants in the process of learning about permaculture, when we say there are established permaculture gurus and that's who you have to learn from, that's the subject for an upcoming video, by the way, we are limiting the learning process. Permaculture principle 11, use the edges and value the marginal. How can we take folks on the margins and fold them into what we're doing so that they can teach us what they know? How can we include folks who have a different perspective and a different lived experience, and therefore enrich our design and further push us toward abundance? Well, one way that we can do that is that we can create funding in order to reduce barriers for people in participation. That can look like grants and other funding for people to get formal education. It can look like providing childcare for people to participate in permaculture activities like PDCs. I've spoken extensively about the need for childcare and accessibility in PDCs. But it could be something like, even at your local permaculture potluck, that you are creating a place for welcoming children to be included, but also a space where parents can participate and children are cared for. And speaking of resources and how we need to utilize those to open up access for more participants, I also would say, what are we allowing and creating access to, right? What is the framework through which we are facilitating learning? It could be something like a permaculture potluck. It could be something like creating a local guild. It could be something like having formal classes like a workshop or a PDC. It could be something like making sure that we have funding to put permaculture materials into our local libraries. It could be something like creating your work that is not behind a paywall. It could be something as easy as making sure that you have a little free library with permaculture books out front. But it also could be something like making sure that when we're having events, that we facilitate transportation to those events, as well as childcare, that we facilitate folks having appropriate technology to log into Zooms, having internet access. So when we're looking at funding and we're looking at participants and we're looking at accessibility, those all really mesh in together. You can't tear them apart from each other and look at them in isolation. All three of those things play into how do we expand learning in permaculture. When we want to create opportunities for learning, when we want to facilitate a community that is open to learning, where we don't have established experts who feel that they have reached the end of their knowledge, where we don't feel that there is gatekeeping about what we can contribute to the permaculture community, where we are open and receptive to giving our own experience and education and resources, and we are receptive to receiving education and resources from others. What does that look like? How can we enable people to connect with each other and facilitate learning? I already mentioned things like making sure we have funding for childcare, making sure we set up transportation, et cetera, et cetera. But what does it look like to create those community relationships where we have open access to learning? Yes, utilizing things like the commons, like having our libraries stocked with resources. But what does it mean to you specifically in your specific community to facilitate permaculture learning, to facilitate a posture of learning and an openness to receiving and giving information and resources? I think this can be really difficult for us. What are the ways that we have outreach to the community? What are the ways that permaculture is not fringe and seen as kind of like, either prepper gardening or hippie gardening? How do we help normalize and open up access so that all people have the ability to learn about permaculture and to connect with the earth care, people care, and fair share aspects as well? I think it's well and good to lean toward the philosophical. Oh, my dogs are gonna get up from their naps. I think it's well and good to lean toward the philosophical, but permaculture has to have real practical solutions. It has to have real applications. And I think when we're talking about how do we facilitate learning, how do we as individuals keep ourselves open and receptive to learning? How does that help us push toward abundance? Also, real practical ways that we can do the same for our community. How can we increase access to learning and teaching opportunities for folks in our community? How can we make a better world by being open to learning and realizing that there is no end to the learning that we can do? And that means there's no end to our ability to try and create those human connections and increase our abundance and resilience as a people. So thank you for watching today. I'll be back really soon. I am filming this before my surgery, and so I will continue to recover. I know that the next several videos will be kind of topical and not really out doing physical things in the garden, but if you are interested in some of my more physical outdoor projects, you can go back and look at some of my old videos. In fact, that would be probably one of the best ways that you could help support this channel while I am publishing a little bit less, while I am laid up, is to just go watch some of my old videos. Maybe that is something that will help you in your own personal permaculture journey. And I hope that it will also illustrate the ways that I've grown and changed and been receptive to, advancing my own permaculture, been receptive to the fact that I don't know all there is to know and I'm still learning. Even though I've been doing this for more than 20 years, I'm still learning. And I feel like permaculture is such a wonderful opportunity to never get to the bottom of that rabbit hole. It's a journey that you can continue to chase and continue to enjoy and can continue to help hone you as a person. At least that's how it's worked for me. It's helped me become a better person, a person who lives a more full and enjoyable life. And so I hope that you will check out some of those older videos, and maybe you'll see like, oh, Angela really has worked on herself, and permaculture has really helped her progress as a person over the last, however many years I've had this channel, 8, 10, I don't know. So thank you again for watching, and I'll be back really soon.